if you're really committed to developing your cardiorespiratory fitness, you're trying to maximize the area of a triangle, right? So the triangle has a base and the triangle has a peak. And the goal is how big an area can I get? Not how wide, not how tall. You don't want one that's this wide and this tall, and you don't want one that's this tall and this wide. You want the max. The base is your zone 2. The peak is your VO2 max. From a training perspective, the rule of thumb that is applicable for people like us, i.e. normal people, and the best athletes in the world is roughly 80-20. 80% of your volume is down here, 20% of your volume up here. In fact, some of the really, really elites are probably closer to 90-10.
So you're saying no matter if you're just an ordinary athlete or you're the best of the best, it's still roughly the same.
Tadej Pogačar, who's the greatest cyclist on this planet, 2-time winner of the Tour de France, absolutely mopping up the field of cyclists like they're children. That guy's doing 80 to 90% of his training at zone 2. And I know that for a red fact because we know who his coach is.
If you know it's kind of 80%, 20%, let's break out.
So I just start with how much time am I willing to put into this? Now, I got to be honest with you. I wish I could be putting 10 hours a week into cardio. I do. I mean, historically, I've put in 14 to 20 hours a week into cardio up until 10 years ago. So it's simply not possible today. For all of the obligations that I have, and I've done the math 10 ways to Sunday, I'd have to give up something I'm not willing to give up. I've had to give up archery or give up driving or give up my kids or something like I'm not willing to give any of these things up. So I basically start with what's the most amount of time I can put into dedicated cardio. And for me, it's like 4 to 5 hours a week, not including rucking. I sort of keep that in its own bucket. So then it's a very simple calculation. 80% of that time is zone 2 and 20% of that time is VO2 max.
And how are you breaking out? Let's just start with zone 2. How many?
I divide it into 4 workouts a week.
So 4?
Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Actually, why don't I just walk you through the whole week? Yeah. That'll be easier. So Monday is just strength training. So that's about 90 minutes to 2 hours when you include the stability training that I do as well. So movement prep, stability training, strength training, and that's all lower body. That's Monday. Tuesday is zone 2, followed by dedicated hour of stability. Wednesday is upper body strength and stability. Again, 90 minutes to 2 hours. Thursday is a repeat of Tuesday. Friday is a repeat of Monday. Saturday is zone 2 in the morning, upper body strength, repeat of Wednesday in the afternoon. Sunday is zone 2 followed by VO2 max.
And will you ever do VO2 max before you do zone 2?
I generally don't, just because I like to have a lot of reps before I go for broke. So even when I was like a cyclist and doing 2 zone VO2 max workouts a week, they were always preceded by a long, the metric we would use on a bike was kilojoules. So it was how many kilojoules of work would you do before you would do the super hard sets? And it had to be at least 1,000 kilojoules, which would translate to at least 1,000 calories of work.
And for zone 2, I know you said you kind of like to break it up. Is if someone is like, hey, I can do 4 days a week of zone 2, but I can only do 15 minutes a day. Would you say?
Then I'd compress it. I would say do 2:30s.
So in your zone 2 sessions, you like to do at least 30?
At a minimum, yeah.
And now when you're in those zone 2s, are you, like when you hit the bike and the clock starts?
No, I take 10 minutes. I do all mine on a bike, sometimes on a treadmill. But what I do is there's a little, the computer is programming to the Wahoo Kicker, which is the device I'm sitting on. So it's taking 10 minutes to ramp me up.
Mm-hmm. And maybe just walk through what modalities can people do zone 2 on? Treadmill, bike?
Anything that is steady state. So, swimming is a great way to do it because you can really swim in a pool at a steady state. Running is a great way to do it because you can pretty much run at a steady state. Cycling outdoors is generally hard unless you have specific. Like Fiesta Island was a great place to train. I used to train at Fiesta Island because, for people who don't know where that is in San Diego, it's where all the time trial bike races were, and it's just a 7-kilometer loop that you can ride on without lights or any, like there's no traffic or anything that gets in your way. But for the most part, like I wouldn't be able to do zone 2 outside here in Austin. It's too hilly and there's too much traffic, and it fits and starts. I can do my VO2 max here because I go to a hill, and that's my favorite way to do VO2 max is on a hill that's about a mile long and just do very hard up the hill and then easy down the hill. But a treadmill is another great way to do it. Just kind of a walking incline typically. Rowing machine, if you're really a good rower, you have to be efficient enough. Most people are not efficient enough, and they don't have the strength, they don't have the stability to row really well for 45 minutes. Stair climber is another really good one. But it depends. Again, if you're starting out, brisk walking is probably good enough too.
Yeah, and we don't have to get into all the reasons of the benefits of Zone 2 because we have so many podcasts with Inigo, San Milan people can listen to, but you kind of hinted at another thing there, which is, when you start your Zone 2 workouts, you'll ramp up, but also a lot of times we get questions where, hey, I did a 90-minute workout and I was in Zone 2 for 45 minutes of it. Am I good?
No, I mean, I think what you mean in that question is, like I went out for a 3-hour bike ride today, and when I got back, my computer told me I did 45 minutes of Zone 2. So 2 issues there. One is that's just a Zone 2 based on heart rate. That's generally the worst approximation of Zone 2. So Zone 2 really is more based on lactate, if we're going to be purely accurate, or at a minimum RPE. But even if you posit that 45 minutes of Zone 2 from your heart rate is roughly accurate, it's not the same physiologically, because usually you're passing in and out of Zone 2 in that situation. And so you're not getting kind of that constant steady state churn, which you're looking for. What you're really kind of looking for is the harnessing of mitochondrial efficiency. And to do that, you have to be able to push oxidative phosphorylation right to its limit before you trip into glycolysis. And you're at the limit of that glycolysis being the dominant energy source. Whereas if you're on that ride, you're going into and out of glycolysis constantly. So it's not that you're so much in Zone 2 for 45 minutes as that you passed through Zone 2 for a sum total of 45 minutes, which again, there's still value in that, but not for what we're talking about.
Yeah. And what about VO2 max? What modalities can you do VO2 max training on?
Here I think it's probably easier in a way, right? Because it's pretty much anything that gets your heart rate up and gets you very tired. So look, it could be an air bike, it could be a regular bike, it could be a stationary bike, stair climber, treadmill, running outside. The sky's almost the limit. Something like burpees is probably pretty tough once you get into something that intense like jumping, because the sweet spot for VO2 max is kind of 3 to 8 minute intervals. So you don't want to be doing things that are so intense that you can't do them for at least 3 minutes.
And so what's your current VO2 max workout? So you mentioned kind of 3 to 8 minutes on. Is it?
Typically I do 4 on, 4 off is sort of where I spend most of my time. Sometimes 3 on, 3 off on a rowing machine. I got into that quite a bit last summer, but these days, and sometimes, by the way, I just am in a bit of a rush and I'll just do 1 minute on, 2 minute off at a much higher intensity on the stair climber. So I have one of those like industrial grade strength climbers, and sometimes I'll just go sprint for a minute up the stairs, and then it takes me 2 minutes to get my heart rate back down to about 100, and then repeat that for 20 to 30 minutes. So that's kind of like my poor man's cheating VO2 max workout. But what I really like to do is 4 minute repeats, 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off.
And on the 4 minutes on, are you going 100% for the full, like how should someone think about?
Yeah, this is one of those things you have to play with this. There's a this is years and years of practice to know what that feels like. So again, I'm doing this on a bike, so I'm looking at wattage, and my watts are so low now, I'm embarrassed. So I'm not going to tell you what the watts are because they're so much lower than they used to be. But I know, I have a sense of what I need to average my wattage over those 4 minutes. So I might go out at 105% of that wattage. And it feels pretty easy for the first minute. If it doesn't, I've gone too hard. By 3 minutes, I'm very uncomfortable. And at a minute, in that last minute, i.e. at 4 minutes, I don't have much left. So that's, if you go out all out in that first minute, you're not going to get to 4 minutes. You're just going to crash, and you're sort of not in that zone. So it's not, there's no question I positive split the thing, meaning I do more work in the first half than the second, but I don't want it to be more than about 10%.